Okay, so in the July update, I talked about upgrading our Walthers well cars to something with a little bit better details. And Gold Metal Models makes this etched metal piece is designed for the Walthers 5 unit Thrall uh, well cars, which is exactly what we have here. Now these cars, honestly, they are, I mean, they're beautiful. They're heavy. This is all metal. They have nice crisp lettering, but my version came with standard, uh, the cheap couplers that come on, like beginners cars, I guess we'll call it. But I replaced those with microtrains, and then because I've had this kit for it was my first 5 unit car. I replaced the wheel sets and gave us, actual microtrains wheel sets here. And to do that, this pin, which is longer than a standard bolster pin, because it needs to accept the next car, basically. They were a little bit difficult to remove, but if you're very careful, and you have to be careful because you don't want to break that pin, you can get them out and get nice microtrains or the wheel set of your choice, I guess, on there. And the only other complaint that I have of the car is, yeah, that walkway detail is it's a little amateurish, I guess. And this detail, I mean, this is bulky, and it's it's not to scale. And I'll be honest with you, I was okay with it. I accepted that level of detail. I would put this unit, mid-train and surround it by, Cato or Deluxe Innovations or whatever well cars, and didn't look bad. But now that I saw that there is a kit available, yeah, we're gonna have to upgrade that. So it does come with instructions on how to assemble this, and there's a written description on the back how to remove it and how to get everything set up. And we are going to we're going to get started here. So if you'd like to see how I replace these, stay tuned and we'll get right into it. Okay, first step in our process is we need to get these plastic pieces off, and they actually pop right off. There's no real need to go crazy with them. They're just sort of glued on. And if you get your fingernails under there, you don't need any special kind of tools. They come right out of the pressed on part here. So the only ones that are different as far as on this unit are the end pieces. They come off the same way. They're shaped differently because they got the end walkways on them. So when you go through here and you're removing these pieces, you don't have to pay too much attention to where they go, because it's pretty self-evident, where these pieces go. So go ahead and break all these pieces off. You're not breaking off is not the right term. You're just pulling them off, basically. I would say be careful with this other detail. This other detail's pretty robust on here, so I wouldn't be afraid of it. I wouldn't be shy around it. It's all cast metal of some sort, so you're not gonna break it off. It's not some delicate piece. And don't worry too much about these the stirrups and the handrails. One, because you're going to be cutting them off, and two, because once again, they're not plastic, they're metal, and they don't move. And it's probably why this car, in my case, has made it through my N-scale apprenticeship, because like I said, this is one of the first, I'm gonna call it adult models that I collected. And so I've always liked the intermodal cars, and this one, it was cheap. It was inexpensive. I think it was $30 at the train show, maybe. And when the Deluxe Innovations was in their prime, their cars were going for 80 or more, depending on whether or not you got them with the containers in them. So this was, as a young modeler, this was a great alternative. And like I said, the detail on it is really good. So why would you not put a couple of these in your roster. It only made sense. And because the details were a little bit bulkier and a little bit heavier, I didn't break them off as I was, transporting my, basically what was a toy train at that time around the, to family events. So this this is going to be a nice upgrade for this piece. The next thing we got to do is we got to take our new metal metal pieces here off the sprue. It's not complicated. In fact, they recommend you do it with a number 11 hobby knife, which is exactly what we're going to do here. So press straight down onto it, and that's what we're going to do. And the piece comes right free of the connection, so it's going to make life much easier. Once the piece is free, be very careful that you don't bend it, because if you bend this or damage it, these pieces are very hard to try to return to their shape. So be very careful when you handle these once they're free of the sprue that they came on. I'm going to cut the rest of the pieces free, and then we'll be back for the next step. You guys, you like my little tripod here? Yeah, it's perfect, right? So one thing that I did want to show you is I think conventional wisdom, when you're dealing with metal, you want to cut it, right? So you want to cut it as fast as you can. And you may be inclined to grab something like a sprue cutter or some other piece of heavy equipment, we'll call it. And I'm going to tell you right now, you don't want to do that, because what happens is you end up putting pressure on this very, 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 very thin metal, right? And so when you do that, the first thing it does is it crimps it, and it puts a crease, and then it cuts through, and you'll damage the very, very, very fine metal that's here. So what you want to do to make sure that you don't bend it in any way, take your finger, get it as close to the end point as you can, and then just take the very tip of the knife and slide right through it. You'll notice that is just enough to cut right through there, and the piece will come free. And I mean, there's not much to this piece, right? There's not. It's very, very, very fragile. So that's all you need to clean this up. And we're going to use the same technique here where it wasn't quite close enough. All you're going to do is you're going to grab it right here on the edge, and you're going to just apply a little bit of pressure, and that's going to clean up that edge for you. And you don't want to apply anything more than that, because you don't want to introduce any type of torque on this piece unintentionally, because what will happen is when it torques, it'll bend, and that will put it in a shape that you'll never get it back to this factory flat. So be very careful when removing these pieces. And the more detailed the piece, the more careful you need to be, because obviously the finer details will result in a lot greater damage when you go to cut them. And they've made the pieces that hold them on so very, very thin. It takes nothing for a sharp knife to get right through. So I would suggest putting on a new blade before you do this, and then just very carefully cut it right off. You can see that even with the blade here on this, you're able to mark this metal up. So it's not a hard metal. It will come free. So just be patient with it as you remove the pieces. Okay, now comes the part that's going to feel like it's like you're damaging a part of your memory here. But take your end platforms. There's going to be two of them, 2 A units, and you're going to snip off these very robust, very metal ends, and you're going to do a little bit of damage. That's okay. I'm going to show you why in a minute. But you're going to snip all of these off using whatever rail cutter or tool of your choice, and that includes cutting this brake wheel off as well. So they don't give you a brake wheel stanchion, so you're going to leave the stanchion. You just need to get the plastic piece off of here. So they do give you some nice etched metal stanchion brake wheels for that. So if it's nicely on there, I'm not going to use these cutters to take this off. I'm just going to pop this off with a knife. Okay, we're switching tools here, and we're just removing the brake wheel. It pops right off, and do not cut off this stanchion. If you do, there is not a piece in the kit that puts this back on, and you're going to be trying to CA this thing back onto the platform. So do not cut off the stanchion with the brake wheel, and you are going to do this process twice, basically. The brake wheel's only on one side, but these parts are on two. So take your time, cut it level. The more level that you cut it, the less filing you're going to have to do. And of course, the less rework you have to do is always better. And then one thing we didn't show, you can remove the wheel sets if you'd like to. I chose not to. We do need to cut those off as well. You have brand new grab irons and rungs as part of this kit, so you do not need the ones that they provide. I keep my finger over the top of this thing, so when I cut it, I'm not going to send this little piece flying. It could fly back to you, could fly into something. It's just better keep your finger over top of it, and then the piece will come right off. And once you're done cutting that, time to go for your jeweler's file. Okay, every modeler should at some point in their modeling career end up getting a set of needle files. This version is from Testers. There's a lot of different types out there. You just need to find one that has a nice variety of sizes, shapes, and this I purchased. It's probably got to be at least 7 or 8 years ago, and it is certainly I use it typically for track installation, because sometimes you get the Kato joiners on the track don't quite line up right, and you need to get in there and file the joint down so that you get a smooth transition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this file and very, very carefully file down where we cut off the grab irons and the handrails, and make preparation for the new handrails. In this process, probably one of the most important things is I don't want to do any additional damage beyond the removal of the pieces that I've already done here. So I'm going to take the trucks off so that I've got a working surface, and let me get my instrumental pieces out of the way here because I don't want them to become a casualty. So I'm just going to move these over here. And as you can see, we've got these sort of metal nubs that are left. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the car flat, and I'm going to take the file, and I'm just going to work the file back and forth until I get that sufficiently smooth with the underside of the car. Now, because I'm doing this, you are going to expose the soft metal that the car's made of, and we're going to have to patch that in. So you want to be very careful with how much you file. One, because you don't want to misshape in the car, and two, you don't want to have to repaint the whole car. Now, if you are going to repaint the car in its entirety, no big deal. You can go as crazy as you want here. But if you're like me and you intend to just patch it and be done with it, then let's be careful with what we do. And all we want to do is get that part smooth with the rest of the car's underside here, so that our new pieces won't look like they were put over old pieces, so to speak. So it doesn't take long, especially with this metal being as soft as it is, to just remove the little nubs left over from the cutting. And at the same time, we are minimizing damage to the car itself. So we're getting a nice smooth surface. Looks good from the side, and we haven't damaged too much of the car. Now, I'm not as worried about the underside as I would be about the top side. And there is still a pattern. I don't know if you can see it here in the camera. There's still a pattern on this piece. So I want to be very careful that I don't disturb that pattern too much, because I don't want it to look funky. Remember, the pieces you're putting through are photo etched, so they are see-through, just like the real walkways would be. And so if you have imperfections underneath them, you're probably not going to hide them very well. So just be careful with what you're taking off. That's what it should look like when it's finished. Nice, it's smooth. Minimize the damage to the car itself. And you're going to repeat this process twice for each of the end platforms. So once you get that done, we are going to have to apply a coat of paint because, like I said, that shiny metal is going to show through our etched metal walkways, and we don't want to see this. So we're gonna sand this piece down, get it nice and level, and then we're going to apply just a little bit of paint. And I'm not going to care if the paint is like spot on match, and I'm going to show you why here in a second. But I do want it to be close. And it's very important that when you're doing this step, like I said, you're careful. And the closer you can cut it with the tool when you're removing it, the less filing you're going to have to do. But when you're done, your platform should look nice and level and be ready for your new platform pieces. Okay, so we're ready to patch our car damage. I'm using two Vallejo paint colors. I have a yellow ochre and I have a dark brown. There are the model numbers right there for you if you need to see what colors they are. The mix is probably about 8 drops of this yellow to 1 drop of this brown. This brown is very powerful. It actually surprised me how brown it was. But the nice thing is we're doing such a very small area. You know, I don't think anyone's ever going to notice it. So just touch that up real quick. Underside of the car, same deal. We just want to hide this damage that we did here. So in my case, I think I'm going to just kind of feather this in a little bit. You can see that the color is, yeah, it's close, not quite. But for what we're doing here, it's going to be fine. And the reason I say that with confidence is, in addition to just getting some paint on the car, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to weather the car. This mix sort of makes a very grimy color of what we have on here. So it's going to work out just perfect that's a nice match. So happy accident, but you know, we'll take those. Count that as a win. So what we're going to do, just apply a little bit of paint to each of the areas that we exposed and hides that very shiny metal. And once we get the metal hidden, that would be the time to weather the car. So we're going to weather the car before we put any of the etched metal pieces on. Now, the reason being is the etched metal pieces do not get painted. So I don't want them to be in the way of the weathering. Let's go ahead and get the car weathered. Okay, so our repair color is just a hair darker than the rest of the model's color. And as such, it is almost the perfect grime color for this particular car. So I'm taking it and I'm using it with a very small detailed brush to add some subtle, it's almost too subtle to see, dirt and grime marks here on the model. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to highlight the areas on the car where the dirt would collect, and that's going to be in the ribs of this particular model. So you're going to have it right here from grime that's, you know, kicked up on the road. It's going to settle in these joints, and I'm actually going to use that to bring out some of these details too, especially under the edge of the car. And what I'm getting here is it's almost it's like a dirty look to the paint color. So it almost was like, rather than we're painting on grime basically, but it's still allowing enough of the undercolor to show through. And because these are acrylics and we are painting on a metal surface, even though it's painted, they're also allowing the lettering and everything that's underneath here, because it's such a thin coat, it's coming right over it. So this is actually working out just perfect. So same mix, about 8 drops of the yellow to 1 drop of the brown here, and it's making a nice uniform dirty look. So I'll go ahead and do all these other cars and get them ready. Okay, so yesterday like I said we're not going to worry too much about how close we get to the match of the actual car color. And here I have the 2 colors that I mixed. If you recall, it was 8 drops of the yellow, and it was 1 drop of this dark brown, and that was yellow ochre. So we got a result that looked exactly like this. So that's, you can just barely see the weathering on the side, and you'll note that there's the metal filing at the top is hidden. Underneath, it's hidden. It's a pretty close match. But where I use the extra paint, you can see on the side, it kind of looks like the sides got washed. And that's what I was looking for, to dirty up the sides just a bit. Now, that's not the final form, obviously. The next step is we need to make it look a little bit darker, a little bit dirtier. And to do that, I am using AK Interactives, and it's actually called Railroads Wash. And the process for that is just like any other wash. We're going to take a flathead brush, and we're going to just get it into the area here where the platform will be on the end. And because it's a wash, it does flow. It's going to flow into all the crevices. You can go as dark or as light as you want. I've chosen to go a little bit darker here. And this is going to be where people would be getting on the train, as far as workers. And then I'm going to brush this down just a little bit underneath here. This is also where the wheel set is going to be kicking up debris. So I want to get that nice and covered. Don't forget the inside. You're going to have the same thing in here. On the wheel well. And then we're going to come out and use... Don't be afraid to rework this. This stuff will, because it's a wash, it's going to sit where it sits heavy, it's going to dry heavy, and where it sits lighter, it'll dry lighter. And you want to get a little bit of a texture, kind of a, I want to call it a pattern. I guess it's more of a texture. But then we're going to take this and we're going to just darken up some areas. Now, one of the things about darkening up areas, we want to make sure that we follow the basic principles of weathering, and that is that we're going to build it up in layers, right? So just like it would in real life, we want to follow a single pattern, which is basically from the top down for this, because we're modeling streaking dirt. So if we were going the other, if we were trying to model where it would be kicked up, which we're going to do shortly, we would be using upward brush strokes, but since we're modeling what's coming down the train, we're going to use downward. It's easier if you remove these trucks, but like I said, these pins were really difficult to remove, and since I can get in there without too much fuss, I'm going to leave them in place. Okay, so that takes care of your end platforms. You end up with something that looks kind of like that. Take some of this grime over the side. The next step is going to be to take a much finer brush and go over the areas where you've already touched with the paint. And so what I want to do is, I don't want to cover the same area. In fact, I want to keep it a little bit distinctive. And by doing that, I'm going to create a shadow effect, so that lighter color, which is underneath, is going to appear out from underneath this darker color, and that's going to give you a simulation of grime that's building up on your train cars and is slowly being washed down the side of the car. Don't be afraid to go put multiple layers on it if you'd like. You can keep building it up. It's hard to go backwards, so once you put on a heavy layer, you can't really go back. But thin layers building up to it, the result's not bad. Okay, if you follow my steps, you should end up with a car that looks something like that. Okay, and maybe you're happy with that, and that's where you want to leave it. But I'm looking more for an effect, a little more subtle, something more like that. So when you put these two on top of each other, you can see the top colors are faded a lot more. They look like they're running a lot more, and the bottom is very dark. So there's a trick I'm using, and I don't know that it's necessarily the right way to do it, but it works. So first thing is you got to get yourself some earth effects. Now this is AK Interactive that we're using here, and it's kind of a browny mud color. And you're going to take your very fine paintbrush, and you're going to go ahead and load it up so that you're ready to go. And just take that earth effects and just get it all in there. It doesn't really matter. It matters a little bit where you get it. Keep it in the darker areas, but it doesn't really matter what pattern you put it on, because we're gonna change it here in the next step. So just go ahead and get everything coated the way you want it. And after that, we're going to come out with a secret weapon. And the secret weapon, of all things, is turpentine, so paint thinner. Because these paints are enamel-based. And so you're going to take your same little brush, instead of loading it up with paint, you're going to load it up with thinner. Obviously, you want a clean thinner. You don't want to be putting weird colors on there. And you're going to go ahead and just soak that area you just did. And get that thinner in there. Get those colors mixing. Now, because it is a thinner, it is going to thin and remove the colors you put on. So be very careful with how much you move your brush around, because not only are you mixing your colors, but you're also taking your colors off. So keep that in mind. But this is going to give these colors a lot of play. And once you've done that, you're going to tilt the car on its side, and you're going to take a paper towel, and you're just going to gently wipe some of that paint off. Be very careful, because if you take too much of it off, then you got nothing left. If at the end of the day you don't like how it came out, or you do like how it came out, you can always modify it in any way that you want. So you can either add more of the wash, or you can add more of the turpentine, and using those back and forth, you can continue to change your weathering until you get exactly how you want it. Now, the only word of caution I have is, because you're using a paint thinner, you got to be very careful that you don't damage the decals that are on here, because they will get soft, and if you scratch them with either your paintbrush or your paper towel, then you're in a whole another game. But you can get some pretty decent results. So we're going to do that in here. We're going to soften up all these lines, smooth all of this out using the turpentine, and to continue the weathering for the other 5 cars. Okay, when you're done weathering, you're going to have something that looks similar to this, I would imagine. You can go heavier, you can go lighter on the weathering. You can change the dust and dirt color if you need to, based on your locale and the dust that it might be picking up. But that's pretty much the areas that you're going to want to hit. Places where dirt is going to collect, get kicked up. Don't forget, because these cars are open, in between you do see the top of the trucks, so make sure that you get those weathered as well. And now it's time to start putting the parts and pieces on. Okay, the next step that we're going to take here is to actually build the platforms. Now, the platforms obviously come as flat pieces, because we cut them out of a photo etch sheet here. So to get these into shape, we need to follow the instructions, and they're very clear, but you do have to bend the parts. Yeah, it's a little hard to see here, but you do have to bend the parts into place before setting them onto the model. So I find it easiest, I have a very small pair of pliers, and those pliers are very flat on the end, and they are perfect for bending pieces just like this. So what I do is I'm going to take it, and right where I want the crease to be, I'm going to place the edge of the pliers. And then very carefully, I'm just going to bend the metal back along that edge. And that's going to give me a perfect 90-degree bend. Once we have that perfect 90-degree bend in, we're just going to take the edge of this platform and we're going to sort of push this back against it. Be very careful with this step because you don't want to misshape these, because like I said, once you misshape them, they don't go back, at least not easily, and never the way they're supposed to. So be very careful how you bend it. Make sure that you're grabbing it as close to the point where you're working as possible, and then you'll end up with a platform that's slightly bent just like that. And you're going to do that a handful of times. Now, when you're doing this, take your time, be very careful. Use your tools. It's gonna save you a lot of frustration later on the install if you bend these properly the first time. Okay, for the last step, I'm using a micro brush to put some super glue. It's just Gorilla Glue at the ends of each car, and then I'm using just my fingers to take the piece that we've already bent, set it in there. It's very important that you keep the glue to a minimum because you don't want it oozing up through your etchings. And then once you set it on there, you're set and ready to go. Make sure that your etchings are not outside the well because that'll stop you from putting containers in place. Make sure that you've got your clearance between cars. You don't want to have anything bouncing out and causing a derailment there, so make sure that the cars can still spin freely. And then last but not least, make sure that you've got them glued down flat and in place, because if they're not, then they're not going to look correct. They won't ride correct, and they won't accept containers correctly. Okay, you're going to have two pieces that have extended platforms. Those go on the ends. They take you from the edge of your car back to the platforms that's on all the other cars. But we need to put the end on. This has the handrails, the grab irons, and the foot rungs on it. And you'll notice this one is missing one of its handrails. There's only 3 on it. The other one has 4. And no, before you say anything, I did not make a mistake and cut one off. There's a reason for that, and I'll give you a second to guess what it might be. If you guess to get around the brake wheel, move yourself to the head of the class. That's exactly what it's for. The brake wheel sits on the end of one car, and this will just help it get over there. So there are some very small pieces of metal underneath here that you bend into place. They're kind of hard to see there, but there the tabs are. And those are what is going to end up holding this thing on. So I'm going to glue this on, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. All right, and if you have followed these steps or some reasonable facsimile thereof, you have now taken your Walthers 5-unit well car from a very robust, very durable freight car to an extremely fragile, however highly detailed model that I recommend doing after you've survived your N-scale apprenticeship. I have a few more details to add, like this little brake wheel here. There's a small piece of wire that you can't really see that holds it off of the stanchion there. The wire's not provided, it's just something that I had available to me. You could theoretically glue this right to the stanchion if you wanted to, but the directions do say to used a small piece of wire not glued to do that. I've got some touch-up painting to do. Once that's done, we're going to take it over to the layout and put it on its maiden voyage for the second time. Okay, here is the final product. This is what the Walthers 5-car kit looks like now that it's on the layout. Everything's weathered and threw some containers in there just for show, but you can see the cars look good whether they're empty, whether they're full, whichever way you run them. The only thing that I did off camera was I painted the railings, because in all the photographs that I saw, these kind of looked like beat up, rusted sort of things. They weren't really painted any kind of bright color. So the stirrup there, the brake wheel, I painted those all combination of rust colors using Vallejo rust kit. I did that on both sides. Otherwise, I did not obviously paint the grating, which wouldn't be painted. And so anyway, so that was a quick build. It was a fun weekend project. Really brought out the details in the Walthers kit. So, you know, for a cheap little set of well cars, it was, you know, the $10 piece or whatever that was to put that on there really adds to it. So if you are looking for a decent set of well cars, if you pick up the Walthers with just a little bit of work, you can have a fairly nice set of rolling stock there that will rival any of the other ones that you may have on your layout. Alright folks, hope you found this information useful, and happy modeling.